Garden of Eden. The Spirit said to me, at the best the incident concerning the Garden of Eden is recorded in Genesis are symbolic in many ways and should not be taken literally. For by now we know that the theme of divine creation is progressive evolution, whether it relates to matter, mind, or spirit. The Supreme Creator is capable of creating physical world and beings instantaneously in a perfect manner, just as paradise and the billions perfect sphere came to exist in the eternal past. But in the evolving seven grand universes and the innumerable world in them, life evolves gradually. The unity of matter, mind, and spirit takes place progressively for the purpose of cosmic stability. Much time will have to be sacrificed in time-space creation. These are in the very nature of such creations, where the technique of perfection is by evolutionary experience. The divinely perfectly created sons and daughters of the Supreme Being crave for such experience. In fact, they can become supreme ruler of their domain only after associating with beings of evolutionary order and sometimes partaking in the different life forms of evolutionary creatures. Therefore, the evolutionary worlds like planet Earth were not created in 6 days, as Genesis says. It can relate to 6 stages of evolution: the physical stabilization of the sphere, the vegetation era, the animal kingdom, the pre-human civilization, and human civilization, the arrival of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are not the native beings of planet Earth, and they come from the sector capital of the planetary group. They are superhuman beings stationed in the sector capitals. They come to the evolutionary planet after the races of the planet have attained a certain level of culture. The presence of Adam and Eve in the evolutionary planet brings not only biological uplifting by intermarriage between the children of Adam and Eve with the race of the world, but also intellectual and spiritual maturity. Adam and Eve are the visible ruler of the evolutionary planet, and they are responsible for the all-around cultural progression of the planet to which they are deputed. They work in full coordination with the spirit administration stationed at Catch Planet, which in turn is supervised by the sovereign of the sector concerned, as we saw earlier. Lucifer was the sovereign of the sector to which planet Earth belonged, and he has since been replaced and interned. Normally, at the time of arrival of an Adam and Eve, an evolutionary world attains a high level of civilization, witnessed by scientific and technological innovation. Because of the rebellion, the all-round cultural progress of planet Earth was retarded. However, the divine rulers of the had decided to send Adam and Eve to restore order in devastated world. The serpent mentioned in Genesis signifies the vast number of fallen spirit beings, including the deposit ruler of the planet Earth, who were all bent on sabotaging the Adamic mission. Thus, the superhuman couple have to work against a formidable group of enemies from the beginning. The need for a world cultural center. At the time of arrival of Adam and Eve, about 39,000 years ago, planet Earth witnessed great racial strife, crime, and social disorder that is most unworthy of share of what maturity in terms of time from the beginning of human life. The vast cultural heritage which came to be established by the planetary ruler. From his sector, capital was destroyed by the rebellious action of the ruler himself. His followers, Dalmatia, the great center of human civilization in Mesopotamia, that was established as the capital of the planet from where the planetary prince ruled, was already destroyed. All the fine heritage of that world center could not be found anymore at the time of arrival of Adam and Eve. A new center of world civilization therefore became imperative, from where the new superhuman rulers could regenerate the lost culture. Most of the 100 superhuman counselors who came with the planetary ruler to Dalmatia were lost to the rebellion. But there was one by the name of One who had tirelessly worked since then to keep the faith of evolving people in the divine rule. One, like Adam and Eve, was a resident of the sector capital, and he knew very well how the supermaterial beings lived in their permanent home and on planetary capitals when they were sent there as visible rulers. One told his people that a son of God of the supermaterial order was expected on planet Earth about a century before their arrival. He and his followers began to look for the garden which was to be the headquarters of the new rulers. One knew that Adam and Eve lived in the sector capital in lovely garden. Beside the descendants of Adam and Eve were also supposed to live in the garden as mixing of the supernatural violet race, which the rest of the race was to happen much later at the sweetup stage according to divine plan. The garden was also supposed to be the center of education and spiritual learning. Therefore, One and his associates looked for a large area situated in a beautiful surrounding which would facilitate the setting up of the garden. One and his followers succeeded in finding a large peninsular area around the eastern shore of Mediterranean, a great river which its four branches watered the garden area. The peninsula had a most ideal climate by the natural endowment of its landscape and horticulture. It was the most beautiful place on earth when it was fully developed by One and his followers as the center of world civilization and the home of the superhuman rulers. It became truly a paradise on earth, a place of solemn grandeur. The place where Adam and Eve live as visible in different evolving worlds are known as the Garden of Eden. The name derived from Edentia, the constellation capital gardens exist. Plan of the Garden of Eden. The garden was designed with extensive lands all around for pasture and agriculture. The garden itself was supposed to accommodate 1,000,000 inhabitants. It was a great garden community, the biggest this world had ever seen. At the center of the garden was the Father's temple with the Tree of Life, which was in Dalmatia, before and later with One for the support of life for the superhuman beings that constituted the core of his loyal people. And this tree was also to be used by Adam and Eve to have immortality. The fruit of the Tree of Life releases certain space energy antidotal to mortality. It was a complement to any supernatural beings Mortal beings cannot profit from anything by eating its fruit. Surrounding the garden were four sectors. The eastern sector was intended for the exclusive use of Adam's family and his descendants. The western sector for educational use, the northern for government, and the southern for workers and services. Although there were a number of buildings in the garden, they were interspaced between parks, flower beds, lawns, trees, and pools, and in general it gave the look of the most extensive and beautiful botanical garden. The water supply and sanitary arrangement of the garden were excellent. It was done by one and his superhuman associate, who came from a much advanced world. The capital of the sector, the water supply was well protected from contamination. The sewerage was underground and the disposal system, although it was by land, trenching was most efficient by suitable choice of land away from water sources. Thus, this superb garden, under the able leadership of one, stood ready to receive the new rulers of the planet Earth, Adam and Eve. Arrival of Adam and Eve. The Garden of Eden was blooming when Adam and Eve arrived. Before they took the cosmic ship that was driven by the seraphic angel from Sector Capital, they were deprived of their physical consciousness, as they were to pass in space devoid of natural air and in a state of weightlessness. The ship landed in the garden. Adam and Eve were repersonalized by the transport angel. After they gained consciousness, one and his followers brought the new ruler before the huge throng of people that waited to see their supernatural rulers. It was an exciting moment in their lives, for they had never seen beings of that kind before, such heavenly creatures in human body, radiant with a violent glow of light around them. Adam and Eve stood shoulder to shoulder like pillars 8 feet tall. To those simple people, they were gods, descended on earth. Adam and Eve were proclaimed by one as the new rulers of planet Earth. Before the planetary commission that has supervised the planet for nearly 160,000 years, since the removal of the rebellious planetary prince who fell from grace. The new rulers took the oath of allegiance to the divine rule, and there went around the news immediately the arrival of the superhuman Son of God and his consort, and for some time visitors from all over the world started pouring into the garden. Many people came to be attracted by the new culture and teaching of Eden. One and Amadon worked tirelessly to bring many to the new faith, which was the revival of the original Dalmatia spirit. The Adamic family was a wonderful sight to see. Eve gave birth to over 5,000 children, male and female, before they were forced out of the garden after her default. They lived in spacious gardens surrounding the houses, and the children reveled in play and merriment. They were educated at home, the elder teaching the younger. The family of Adam ate fruit and nuts from the garden, while Adam and Eve periodically took the fruit from the tree of life to keep themselves immortal. They were non-meat eaters by divine endowment. They were immortal, but their children were not gifted with immortal life, circuit, and therefore were destined to be mortal. The Adamic children attended homeschool until they were 16, and they went to the Western School of the Garden up to their 20th year, where they learned trade, agriculture, health, recreation, community life, history of races. Religious education was part of home training. In the Adamic family, marriage took place when the children were 20 years old. It is this practice which came to be followed in certain noble and royal families later to protect racial strains. The challenge to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve had a great challenge, the challenge of bringing order in a planet torn by strife and rebellion. Caligastia was still present in the planet with his negative expressions on people against the positive goodness of the paradise rule. The colleges of Adam and Eve served in planets that were well organized before their arrival. But here on planet Earth it was different. They were initially cut off from space communication with system and universe capitals. The rebels under the leadership of the deposit planetary ruler were formidable enemies of the new regime. So Adam and Eve were convinced that they had a very hard path to travel before they could make any significant progress in the planetary culture. The supernatural spirit powers stationed on planet Earth at that time conferred with them and told them the whole story of the betrayal of the planetary prince and of the presence of a host of angelic and spirit creatures who have joined with him to undo the divine plans of evolution. More so, by frustration because of their powerless position. The spirit intelligence warned Adam and Eve to be cautious in every way to the cunning devices of the rebellious forces and advised them to follow the divine plan in all matters. They particularly told them not to revolutionize the slow and steady divine plan of evolution of the planet. Adam and Eve tried to establish a progressive culture ending in a central world government, and they first began to impart in the garden itself, where they fairly succeeded, although there were some people opposite to that idea under the wrong teaching of Lucifer on the concept of liberty. Adam and Eve met with great resistance with their concept of world culture, and government was propagated outside the garden to the tribes. Tired of the problems posed by the people living in the hinterland, Adam and Eve dropped their plan temporarily. They were indeed greatly disappointed. On the top of it, the Planetary Commission and one had also decided to return the sector capital. Thus the full responsibility of the world affair was placed on the shoulders of Adam and Eve. It may be noted that Adam and Eve as man and wife were co-rulers, Eve having the same studies of Adam. They never separated from each other and were always together. Adam took no decision without Eve, and Eve did nothing important without consulting Adam. They were an ideal couple and the kind of family they raised is worthy of emulation. It was a perfect family, and this is the kind of culture with the home as the basic unit of society. with God at the center of human life, which Adam and Eve wanted to introduce on earth. And tragically, even their own family met with a rude shock by their default of mixing good with bad. The fallen planetary rulers, the Black Prince, and his followers were around the garden. They attempted to influence Adam and Eve to change the divine plans of evolution, as they could not succeed. Frustrated, the Black Prince set the eye upon Eve, the target for the eventual fall of the Garden of Eden. He retired from the scene and began to work on a conspiracy in slow motion, so that the entire thing looked natural. Thus, Adam and Eve did not doubt anything of the subtle design of the negative forces. The Black Prince had his hold on the tribe that lived outside the garden and some of their leaders. They were his supporters during the outbreak of rebellion. He caught hold of a tribal leader by the name Serapatia to brainwash Eve gradually on the plan of accelerating the progress of the planet Earth, which has been so much retarded. By the better cooperation of the tribe and the garden, this was a generous approach, and for nearly 100 years, the tribe, especially those who lived around the garden, had a very good relationship with Adam and Eve. In the beginning, Adam and Eve together used to meet the tribal leader, but as years went by and when the trap was finally laid by the insidious Black Prince, Eve had begun to meet Serapatia privately. Without Adam, the deposit ruler planned to bring down the Adamic ruler through a very attractive young man called Cain, a leader of the tribe around the garden. Cain had always been sympathetic to the garden, as Serapatia began to participate in the garden's program of welfare. There was no room for any suspicious at all. The plan to destroy the garden was subtly and cleverly manipulated that when the trap was finally laid, he was taken unaware. The whole incident took place in an atmosphere of confidence and trust and in friendship, which had lasted now for some years. Poor Eve could hardly suspect the cunning hand of the Black Prince behind the scene. The trap and fall of Eve. Serapatia was sincere in his approach of creating a better race of men by the admixture of the violent race with the tribe. He knew that was the reason Adam and Eve had come to earth, but he did not know that he was playing into the hand of the Black Prince Even the tribal leader during their private meetings had discussed the poor rate of growth of the Edenic culture in the world around, and the tremendous resistance they were receiving to their effort. Eve was very much concerned that she and her husband were not making any progress in interracial harmony. The tribal leader was also concerned about the problem, but he could not see the wisdom behind the divine plan for waiting such a long time to bring about the mixture of the violet race with the rest of the race of the world. The spirit intelligence had told Adam and Eve that interracial marriage with the violet race should be done only after the descending of Adam and Eve had become about 1 million in population, by which time it was intended to raise the intellectual and spiritual level of the mortal, without which the mixed marriage would not bring fruitful result. But the tribal leader wanted to see some results soon. He could not wait for such a long time. One fine evening, as the tribal leader met Eve, he suggested her meeting Cain privately in order that some solution might be found for the problems that faced the garden. Eve agreed. The fateful meeting took place in a remote part of the garden among shrubs and trees. It was already dusk. Eve had not met before such a handsome mortal man like Cain, so impressive, can operate totally sincere in his approach to Eve. As they began to talk, Cain became rather informal with Eve. Never before had Eve been in such intimate company with a mortal of realm. He manipulated such enticing words that Eve believed that a superior race of men could be generated, and much sooner. For the accelerated development of the world, Cain's flattery and persuasion added to the clothing of Eve's power of distraction. At that moment she thought that what she was doing was to help implement the divine plan. She was not conscious about the meaning of its achievement and the mortality of it, for she was in the spell of Cain, who looked to her eyes as another Adam, the earthly type of magnificent one, the father of a new type of generation to fill the earth and bring interracial harmony and rich culture. It was done even before Eve realized that she was with a man who was not her husband. It was done for the first time on earth. A superhuman personality of the order of Eve had mated with a mortal, a thing that had not happened in the galactic universe. Poor Eve was seduced in a clever way too that she did not know. Even though she was deceiving her husband at the same time transgressing her allegiance to the universe rulers of not mixing evil and good. The divine plan are absolute, eternally good. A divine plan will never try to achieve good through bad means. The biological uplift of the human races by itself was not bad, but the way in which it was done was evil. And so Eve sinned. She sinned against her God. It was not merely defiance of the divine plan, but also negation of the sacrament at her eternal marriage with Adam. Adam was shocked to hear the mortal tragedy of Eve. From Eve herself, he came to know, even while he was away, that something had gone wrong with Eve. At this moment, Adam lost his self-control, and his frustration went and mated with a beautiful tribal woman in the garden. The fruit which Eve ate outside marriage, he also ate not that. He found that it was good, but because He couldn't face misery of being stranded alone without his loving wife, for he knew very well that she had destroyed the life circuit connections of immortality by her transgression of the divine law, and she would die. No more the fruit from the tree of life would provide her the complement for immortal living. The archangel had warned Eve before that. On the day she mingled good with evil, she would surely die. When the news of the seduction of Mother Eve came to the notice of the garden people, they became the tribe by surprise and killed every one of them, including the seducer Cain. Adam disappeared suddenly from the garden, and Eve was at the height of her sorrow. Without him, he did not return for a month, and she decided that he had been taken away from her because of her sin. Eve lost all her hopes that Adam would return. The rebellious group were happy that their shame had succeeded and that the Edenic garden of culture was on its doom. News went to the far-off tribal settlements of the fate of their brethren near the garden, and they all marched toward the garden in great multitude, with arms. Suddenly Adam appeared, and Eve was greatly comforted. But there came in a few days the great multitude of tribes who destroyed the garden and took it over. Adam and Eve did not resist. They were not far. They could see the reason behind their right. So they left the garden with their children and loyal people on a long journey to find another place, a second garden. As the news reached the sector capital, the planetary commission came back and assigned charge of administration. Then Adam and Eve knew that they had failed. Adam sought advice from the commissions, but they did not give anything. They said that he might do what he pleased. However, they were assured friendly relation in the future. Two-thirds of the children of the Adam decided to go to Edantia, the constellation capital, by cosmic ship. One-third of the children chose to remain with their parents and struggle with them. The eldest son of the couple decided to stay on Earth in spite of the anguish and pain attending the whole tragedy. Adam and Eve were happy to know from the seraphic messengers that the divine judges did not charge them guilty of rebellion, although they were guilty of violating the divine trust that had been reposed in them. Adam and Eve were, however, told that they had lost all the glory and immortality that abandoned in a supernatural being, and that they would toil on earth like the mortal of the realms. This is final part of chapter 4, the second garden and restitution of Adam and Eve. It took nearly a year for the caravan train of Adam and Eve and their party to reach the second garden site, east of the first garden in the region of Mesopotamia, between the rivers Euphrates and Tigris. This garden is often confused with the first garden. On the way, Eve gave birth to Cain, the son of Cain, and the tribal woman who mated with Adam, gave birth to a girl and died during delivery. Eve took the girl as her own and brought her up with Cain. When they reached the second garden site, they found that it was a very beautiful area. The people who were living in that area fled, hearing that the gods of planet Earth were marching on their land. Adam and Eve and their children, the loyal band of over 1,000 people who chose to come with them, worked very hard on the new lands. It was not so easy to settle down, but Adam and Eve toiled to establish another center of civilization that could transform the world. Although they did not succeed fully in bringing that ideal into reality, yet they did a great deal through their descendants for a rich mixture of the violet race and other races, and this helped the biological progression of the human races. Adam and Eve died like mortal when they were over 500 years old. Before they died, they received a message through the planetary commission that their repentance of their default was wholly accepted by the universe ruler, and on that they would sleep as mortal survivor and be resurrected during the next dispensational resurrection. They also came to know from their sovereign Christ that the late chosen to bestow himself in flesh earth, and this news gave them great joy and was spread abroad. The people since that time have been expecting a Son of God to bring a new era of light on earth. Adam and Eve, after they died, surprisingly enough, were given a special resurrection at the sector capital along with their faithful followers of the garden, who had also died and rested. Adam and Eve are now in the sector capital, serving as two of the members of the advisory council of the sector. The council consists of 24 elders of evolutionary status. These are the 24 elders mentioned by John, the Revelation, and round about the throne were 24 elders sitting, clothed in shining raiment, and they had on their head crowns of gold. The Adamic fall is not the fall of man. Although Adam and Eve failed in their trust as ruler of the planet, their fall is not the fall of man. In the first instance, the involving human race had nothing to do with the defaulting Adam and Eve of the alien violet race. Besides, the default at best is an accidental tragedy. Although unpleasant, it was not premeditated and therefore pardonable even as it happened. At the end, in spite of the default, Adam and Eve, after having duly repented of their error, worked tirelessly in the second garden for the embellishment of human civilization, which they did achieve to a degree. They definitely helped to produce biologically better races of men and impart reality teachings, which came to be fragment of truth in different world religions. Although the situation would have been far different if Adam and Eve had not succumbed to the wiles of the Black Prince. Yet such things became unavoidable in an imperfect world, especially in a rebellion-torn world with no planetary communications, which had put Adam and Eve in an isolated position. In a normal evolving world, Adam and Eve would hardly be placed in such critical circumstances. Therefore, Adam's fall is not the fall of man as interpreted, neither did the human race become cursed because of Adamic default. And now concerning the story of creation of the world and creation of Adam and Eve. The devil, the fruit, the fall, and the curse, these are creation of the human mind, a shambling piece meal legend and stories which floated around in different parts of the world. The story of man's creation out of the clay is found in different parts of the world, and this was a common belief even much before the book of Moses was written. Moses did not teach such stories to the Hebrew people. Most of his teaching passed on from generation to generation, orally, and in this process, such of the substance lost in value as truth. Stories like the creation of the world and the creation of the first man and woman were folk legend of several other peoples. The Hebrew did not have a written script till 900 BC. After their return from Babylonian captivity, the priests assembled the books of from legend which attracted them most and which were believed traditionally. And Moses was made to be the author of those first 5 books of the Old Testament, that people may believe that it is the word of God. The story of evolution of man is a historical fact. Man appeared on earth about 1,000,000 years ago. Adam and Eve were not created on earth. They were imported beings of the violet race from sector capital. Altaf the Black Prince laid the plot for the fall of Eve. The entire story of the devil, the fruit of the good and evil, are all the best allegories of a different course of event. Adam was not beguiled by Eve. Adam did commit adultery as Eve did, so that he may be with her even in death, as he loved her so dearly, and cannot see her condemned to mortal death. Alone it was a very touching human act of Adam, although it was a transgression. Adam and Eve were not caused by God. They were not thrown out of the Garden of Eden. They left the garden with a spirit of non-violence when aggression came in. Eve did not have pain in delivery during all the time he lived on earth. Even the terrible woman he gave birth to, Cain, did not have any birth pain. This pain only came up when the six colored races appeared from the bottoms. The Old Testament editor have scrupulously omitted all oral tradition concerning the pre-Adamic civilization, because they made up a creation story with Adam and Eve as the first man and woman. But in the case of Cain, they made a mistake to make a reference that he settled in the land of Nod. If Cain was the eldest son of Adam, obviously no other people could have inhabited the world elsewhere, not belonging to the pre-Adamic age, and lived about 150,000 years prior to Adam and Eve. The genealogies given in the Old Testament beginning from Adam are not fully correct, for Adam lived about 39,000 years ago, whereas the Bible Adam dated back to less than 8,000 years according to calculation made on genealogy. The Christian Church decided to have the Old Testament as a part of the Bible, as in the beginning, before the Gospels were written, preaching was done from prophecies and psalms, and this usage was perpetuated, and the Hebrew scripture becomes a part of the Christian Bible together with the Gospel and the letters of the apostles. Out of the history of human civilization after Adam and Eve is of interest. The real genealogy are different from what is recorded in the Bible. Therefore, a meaningful comparison is not possible. Further, there is no direct linkage between Joseph the father of Jesus, and Adam. Jesus is not a direct descendant of Adam, although the blood of the violent race was shared by many races, including the Jewish race. It is correct to say that since the days of Adam, the human race evolved by a mixture of the violet race with the other six colored races. No mixing of the violet race was achieved between the red race in America and the black race in Africa. The negative forces that were rampant on planet Earth did not allow the civilization on Earth to proceed upward, although the blending of race was achieved to an extent and a better stock of people was produced biologically, yet their moral and spiritual growth was greatly retarded. The concept of cosmic reality came to be colored with the different doctrine in dogma of religion, and as years passed, the gulf between truth and the doctrine of religions widened without spiritual growth. The human civilization on earth was in a blind alley, and this was the position of the time of incarnation of Christ as Jesus of Nazareth 2000 years ago. There had been many prophets and teachers of not only the Jewish religion but other religions too that worked to bring God consciousness to people. But again, this teaching failed to bring the truth in its fullness, and most of them had a vague and distorted form about cosmic reality. It is only Jesus who, for the first time, taught reality concepts, but unfortunately, they were not fully understood by his followers and disciples, who were simple men, and what is given in the gospel is at the best a fragment.